All right. This is Thursday, May 6th, 2021, Aerospace Engineering Honors. And I'm doing a briefing about using STK to do various assignments. The first one being how do you, how do you have coverage of Moscow using 3 Molniya orbiting satellites? And to back up a little bit, I created a new scenario, and I've decided I'm going to begin by explaining the properties of two basic orbit types. The very first orbit type that I've created is called a geosynchronous orbiting satellite. Geosynchronous means that if I were to run an animation, the time that it takes the satellite to orbit the Earth once is identical to the time it takes the Earth to rotate once. Okay, so I'm going to reset this animation. I'm going to create a place by address, and I'm going to put in Cerritos High School, or Cerritos. Of course, I have to spell it correctly. And in my old age, that's not so easy, right? Cerritos, Mexico, Argentina, and I'm going to choose Cerritos, California. By the way, you should have some feeling that Los Angeles is at approximately negative 118 degrees of longitude, and we're pretty close to 34 degrees north latitude. So just get used to saying, yes, that is where we are. All right, so if I zoom in on a 3D globe, you can say, yes, that looks pretty good. That is the city of Cerritos. Nice. And thanks to Bing Maps being integrated with STK, I'm actually zooming in on the Earth, so I can zoom in inside the planet where everything disappears, or I can just not zoom in quite that far. But great, there's the city of Cerritos. And orbiting the Earth is this geosynchronous satellite. I'm going to set up an axis between Cerritos and the satellite. So under analysis, I select axis. A window comes up. There's only one other object to choose, and that's satellite. And I'm going to compute. And close. Good enough. See that line? Great. That is the straight line from Cerritos to this satellite that I created in geosynchronous orbit. And as I play this animation, the Earth is going to rotate. I'll speed it up. And the satellite is also rotating around the Earth at the same speed. And so this means the direction from Cerritos to that satellite does not change. And I'm going to try to show you the side effect of that. Oh gosh, I know what I need to do. So I need to reset this animation. I should pause in my recording, but too late for that. So now I'm going to just say, too bad, students. I'm going to pin myself. There you go. So here I am in my classroom. I'm going to unplug the microphone, unplug the internet's Ethernet cable, and start carrying my carrying my laptop around with me. Now, you students have pointed out that when I'm not facing directly into the microphone, you poor souls can't hear me very well. So I'm walking outside my classroom. It's a nice overcast day. And no doubt you can recognize your poor students in the background who are stuck here at school instead of being inside a classroom like mine. Nice. So I'm at the outside of the science building. I'm looking towards the quad. There's the restroom, the boys' side. There's the sidewalk that goes to the administrative parking lot. There's the top of my head. Yeah, okay. So here's the administration building. And now look carefully on top of the library. What do we see here? We see a satellite communication antenna. Well, yes, that's what that is on top of the library. And it's very simple in its placement. It is fixed. Once the technician points it at a satellite in the sky, he doesn't have to adjust it anymore because the satellite is always in the very same point in the sky as the communication antenna. And that is the super advantage of using geosynchronous orbiting satellites for communication. This antenna is parabolic shaped with a feed horn at its focal point. The radio wave energy coming from the satellite reflects off the reflector, comes to a focus at that. Think of it as being like a microphone, but it's a radio receiver. Great. So it's cheap compared to a satellite that's moving all around the sky all the time, where you have to keep changing what direction you point in order to see the satellite. All right, so here we are passing through my fine classroom, returning to the power supply, returning to the Ethernet cable, because that's the first. I don't think I need to use the external microphone, so I'll just stop doing that for now. If you students have trouble communicating with me, then you're going to have to let me know. All right, so City of Cerritos, well, the library on top of the science administration building, to look at a particular geosynchronous satellite. That antenna only has to point in one direction in the sky, and it's always the same direction to the satellite. As the Earth turns, the satellite turns around the Earth, and life is good. Nice. Okay, now what if I had a second satellite? Oh man, let me duplicate this one. I'm sorry, I didn't duplicate it. Uh, First, duplicate the satellite. Right click and choose. I guess copy. And then right click and paste. Okay, so now I have two identical satellites with identical colors. So what I'm going to do is first change the color. Boop, there's one. And secondly, slightly change its right ascension to the ascending node. Instead of 0 degrees, let's make it 50 degrees. Yeah, okay. Okay, and let's do access from Cerritos to the second satellite. Compute, close. And so now you can see, oh, well, here's another geosynchronous satellite. And as the Earth spins, both of these satellites are orbiting the Earth at exactly the same rate that the Earth is turning. So what's the difference? The difference is which direction in the sky you would look if you were in Cerritos to see one satellite versus the other. But both of them are along a ring surrounding the Earth directly above the Earth's equator. I guess I should point out to you that Arthur C. Clarke, the guy who first invented this orbit in 1947, he tried to file a patent on it, and it was rejected by the patent office because no one had ever launched any object into outer space in 1947. Too bad, because today, maybe you can begin to recognize this is an incredibly useful orbit. I'm trying to get things back to, whoops, I like being above the North Pole. So here we are, looking down above the North Pole of the Earth. And here's these two geosynchronous orbiting satellites. Great. I'm going to edit that second satellite and switch it to 120 degrees. Apply. Okay. And somehow I've lost the axis for a moment. Oh, it doesn't have access to Cerritos. Nice. It's always below the horizon as viewed from the city of Cerritos, so you can't see it. All right, so I'm going to edit its right ascension until we can actually see it. So let's drop off 20 degrees. Yeah, okay, so when it gets to just 100 degrees, from one satellite to the next is 100 degrees, and you can see that, okay, both these satellites see Cerritos at the same time. In geosynchronous orbit, if I had 3 satellites, each spread by 120 degrees, then the 3 satellites would see the entire surface of the Earth at the same time, between the 3 of them. And of course, they can see each other. If I ask satellite 1, hey, satellite 1, do you have access to satellite 2? And it says, of course I do. Here's the access from satellite 1 to satellite 2. So even though only one of the 3 satellites can see Cerritos, all 3 of the satellites can see the entire surface of the Earth. And so Arthur C. Clarke proposed a geosynchronous satellite communication system that has 3 satellites orbiting the Earth at this magic orbit, where as time goes by, the geometry doesn't change. And that is the beauty of geosynchronous orbit. Now, I said they can see the entire surface of the Earth between the 3 of them. But if you kind of zoom in and look at the Earth, it's much harder to see these satellites when you are in a very close to the Earth's poles. From the point of view of the North Pole, the equator is on the horizon. And that is just terrible for trying to see these satellites. You're looking through the Earth's atmosphere. If there's one tree sticking up, it's going to block your view. So we only look at satellites when they're at least 5 degrees above the horizon, maybe 15 degrees above the horizon. And so that means geosynchronous orbiting satellites are great if you live in Cerritos, if you live in pretty much anywhere in the continental United States, southern Canada, but now when you get up into Alaska, oh my goodness, it's very hard to communicate with a geosynchronous orbiting satellite, just because from your point of view in Alaska, the satellite is just about on the horizon. Okay, just too hard to do. The Soviet Union, of course, the United States' adversary during the Cold War, is in extremely northern latitudes. If we were to, outline Russia, it's way up here. And so, from the point of view of Russia, these nice geosynchronous orbiting satellites are not usable. They're just too low on the horizon. So they invented their own. Here we go. Under satellite, I'm going to activate the orbit wizard and bring up a new satellite. And this time with the orbit wizard, I'm going to choose the type to be Molniya. It means communication, I think. And of course, we want it in some different color from what we've been doing so far. And I'm just going to go with the default values. And there it is. So this is a very different orbit from geosynchronous. If we were to reset this animation and play it, well, that's interesting. I guess it, oh, so what happened was I didn't create a third satellite. I changed the properties of the second satellite, apparently. Well, actually, it says satellite one. So satellite one used to be a geosynchronous satellite. It was the first one I created, and now it's a Molniya satellite, and I need to reset the animation, maybe slow it down, play it. And so what's going on is it's showing when it has access to the geosynchronous satellite. It's showing when it has access to Cerritos. And so that's what these lines are that you see. And so one thing I'll point out to you before I remove it is this Molniya satellite has essentially continuous access to geosynchronous orbit, except maybe right here. Whoop, it disappeared and reappeared. So there's a brief time when it goes behind the Earth and can't be seen by that geo satellite. Okay, I'm going to pause this animation and pause recording for 3 minutes while you take your. Okay, back to exciting STK. I'm going to reset this animation, clean things up a little bit. I don't care about the access between Cerritos and the geosynchronous satellite anymore. So I'm going to go click on Cerritos, select access, select satellite 2, and hit the compute button, which removes it, I think. No, I'm sorry, the remove access button. And close. I'm also going to click on satellite 1. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so I reset and I play, and all it shows is access between Cerritos and this Molniya satellite. Oops, it's also showing the access between the two satellites, and I don't want that anymore. So I'm going to select satellite 1, analysis, access, and select satellite 2 and remove access and close and reset and play. And so now the only line you see is between the city of Cerritos and this bluish type Molniya satellite orbiting the Earth. So the Russians invented this orbit. And the problem is, next time it comes around, from the city of Cerritos, access to it, let's reset it. Okay. Access to it, whoop, changes direction in the sky. So already the Soviets back then, the Russians today, when they communicate with this Molniya satellite, they can't use a simple antenna like the one on the roof of our library. They have to use an antenna. Man, that looks weird when it seems to be going backwards. They have to use an antenna that changes what direction it looks in the sky. So let's just reset this and say, look, as the satellite rises above the horizon, it goes across the sky, moving slowly but still moving. And then it disappears below the horizon. And because it's in an elliptical orbit, if you look at it this way, most of the time it's far away from the Earth, moving slowly. And then for a short time, watch, it comes zooping, zoop, whoosh, below the bottom part of the Earth, typically somewhere near Australia, New Zealand, the southern Pacific Ocean, where there's not many people trying to communicate compared to the northern hemisphere. So this satellite is great. That's why the Russians invented it, or Soviets back then. Now, if in my assignment to you, I wanted you to design 3 Molniya satellites, all 3 of them to be Molniyas. So if I go and create a new satellite, let's insert. I don't know why new doesn't work for me, but I'm going to insert a satellite. And now the satellite 3, I'm going to go satellite, orbit wizard. Hello, orbit wizard. Change the type to Molniya, and it's going to be the same default values. So what I want to change is one of these 3 variables. The apogee longitude is the surface location on the Earth directly underneath where this thing is at its highest point and farthest point in its orbit from the Earth. I do not want to change the perigee altitude. The argument of perigee, I don't really want to change that either. What I really want to change is only the apogee longitude. So I'm going to shift it left or right. I'm going to make it look cool. Isn't that right? So I'm going to choose to put one of these little loop-de-loops around Cerritos-ish and hit OK. So now I have 2 Molniya satellites orbiting the Earth. This isn't the only way to solve this assignment. I had a student do it in a slightly clever, different way, but this is the sort of way I was expecting you to do. So now what I'm going to do is calculate the access from Cerritos to this 3rd satellite. And reset and play. And so what's going on? It has access to the blue satellite. And it never has access to the white satellite. Interesting. There, it has access to the white satellite now. Okay. For this moment, it had access to both satellites. So there's a little bit of time, I think, when neither satellite is above the horizon as viewed from Cerritos. I'm going to reset this and just keep, play it again. All right, so right now it has access to the blue satellite. And this is for about 11 hours of time. And it still has access for a moment. I'm clicking one at a time. And right now, it doesn't have access to either satellite. Boop, boop. So I have not yet solved the homework assignment. But if you go forward just a little bit more in time, it now has access to the white orbit Molniya satellite. So I'm getting access for most of the day just from these two satellites. And there's a moment when I actually have access to both satellites at once. One of them is kind of shooting over the pole of the Earth. And here it is again, a little dead spot. Let me reverse, I'm sorry. So when both satellites are close to the Earth, they're below the horizon as viewed from Cerritos, and there's no access. So if I created one more satellite, Molniya, of course, because that's the requirement. So I'm going to insert satellite, satellite 4, satellite orbit wizard, change the type to Molniya because that's the assignment, change the color to something different from anybody else. And I still want to try adjusting it only by changing the apogee longitude, at least for now. And apply and okay. So there's my third one. I'm not too happy with that. Let me change that again. I just want to make it look maybe interesting. So it still has that one. Maybe if I slide this like this and hit apply, I can say, oh, okay, I like that better. Maybe try this, apply. No, I don't like that because it's so much like the other one. So, was that like 2 degrees? Maybe. So I think I'll try that one. Okay, so this one is different from the other two. And I'm going to calculate the axis from Cerritos to this last satellite, number 4, compute, close, reset, play. So I think if I reset and go look at this, all 3 satellites are below the horizon at the same time. So this will not work unless I change something about this third satellite so that it's not below the horizon. And so now I'm going to make one more change to the satellite, and I'm not going to use the orbit wizard. I'm going to use the basic orbit properties. And out of all these choices, don't change the axis, don't change the eccentricity, don't change the inclination. I would say don't even change the argument of perigee. We just played with the right ascension of the ascending node. But what I'm going to change finally is only the true anomaly. And that is, where is it along its entire orbit? At the beginning of the scenario, let me close it out and show you again. At the beginning of the scenario, all 3 satellites are at their closest point to the Earth in their highly elliptical orbits around the Earth. What if I take satellite number 4, the purple one, and I say, don't start off there. Start off at a different point along your orbit. For example, if I said 180 degrees, that means it would be starting off at its farthest point from the Earth in its orbit. So I'll go ahead and set that just so you can see it, and put in 180 for the true anomaly and apply. And so now you should be able to see, oh yeah, so it's at its farthest point from the Earth in its orbit, while the first 2 satellites are both out of sight below the horizon from Cerritos, close to Antarctica. Satellite number 3 is way up there at the top of its orbit. Now, if I were really good, I'd probably change the true anomaly to maybe 90 degrees. Which didn't work out so well. Okay, so 90 degrees wasn't so great. Maybe, how about 120 degrees? No, still not. All right, I'll put it back. How about 150? I'm still diehard on this. Nope. Okay. 180, and it should be Texas. Okay. So I'm going to live with this and ask myself, does this meet the requirement of the assignment, but set for Cerritos instead of Moscow? So I'm going to play this thing. As long as there's at least one line connecting Cerritos to any of these satellites, I've met the requirements. Okay, so I'm going to reset it and enlarge this some more. And here we are starting at the beginning at 1900 hours on today's date. And we play forward. I guess I could speed it up a little. Nah, let's just go with the speed. So I still have at least one red line. And this is I am going to speed it up. Okay, so speeding it up, I have two red lines. Now I have one red line, two red lines, almost three red lines. I have a red line, red line, red line. Now I'm getting a little worried right there. Okay, good. Still one red line. Ups, right there. There's a problem. Here is a time period when none, oh, maybe it is. I just couldn't see it. Let me slow down, back up. So that was okay. Now I go forward slowly. Okay, so the red line was just hidden by the orbit geometry. I couldn't see it because it was like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and speed it up and say, to me, it looks like I have met the requirements of being in continuous access to Cerritos from at least one of these three satellites at any given time. Sometimes I can see two satellites at once. Okay, so some students have pointed out you can add text to this. So if you click on the 3D window, bring up its properties window browser, and select annotation, data display. Don't choose black, you won't be able to see it, correct? Maybe nice bright yellow. I guess I want to add name. So for the text, type in name, what color you want, what font size you want. Do you want it on the earth or do you want it on the screen? Why don't you put it on the screen? Let's say near the left top and hit OK, apply, OK. And now your name is on the screen. And you can put in whatever information you want, right? Put your name. You might put the assignment title. The date is already being displayed. But this would be nice. Okay, and so how to take a screenshot? That is this little camera icon. And when you click on it, great. In this case, it's asking, where do you want to save the file? And what file type do you want to give it? Make it a JPEG and say it and give it some meaningful name, right? Molniya over Cerritos. And that is just a screenshot of this 3D window. If you want a screenshot of your entire computer screen, on your keyboard, if it's a Windows operating system, you hold down the Windows key, simultaneously the Shift key, and simultaneously the S letter key, and it'll bring up a dialog saying, what is it you want to save? Do you want to save the entire full screen? Do you want to save just this window? Do you want to do a freeform snip, a rectangular snip? I suggest you save the entire window because that'll have all this information on it in the screen snip. And then you can paste it to a Word document to turn in. Okay, so one last thing. This screenshot by itself doesn't prove to me that you've, and here's my latest screenshot. Press Windows, Shift, and stuff. So here I got all this saved to my screenshot. Nice. Oh, nice. Let's get back to STK. Boop. And to show me that it has complete access, maybe what we should do is bring that back to view of timeline. And down at the bottom, all these colored spots are access intervals. As long as I can step from one to the next without a gray gap, that means I have continuous access. So this view down here on the bottom is what will get you to convince me that you've completed the assignment correctly. And I think you can hide some stuff, right? So here I'm displaying only the axis from Cerritos to the first satellite in the top row, to the second satellite in the second row, to the last satellite in the last row. And a screenshot that shows this axis timeline view will work really well for you. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording now.